Requirement of the standard starts from clause number 4, the context of the organization. Now, you know what is context of the organization. Every organization is established with certain purpose, with some problem that it wishes to address, the service or the product it wishes to offer. A college, a university is established to promote education. PCB has been established to promote quality education, occupational health and safety, and environmental management system trainings worldwide. It was established to offer inspection and product certification, including management system assessment and certification services. We found it is important to develop capable people, and those people can create value to organizations. So by developing outstanding auditors by our training, we can help industries to improve their own performance better, and we can contribute in career building of the learners, those who join our courses. So that was the higher purpose of TCB. Now, this is affected by issues that comes from within the organization, from outside the organization, which could be competitive, which could be geopolitical, which could be any issues beyond our organization's control, legal requirements, many other such requirements. For example, we are governed by IRCA and CQI IRCA regulation. Therefore, we have to comply with those requirements. If we are in Dubai, we are operating in Dubai, we need to comply with KHDA, Knowledge and Human Development Authorities approval. And if we are operating in Abu Dhabi, for example, we need to address activate requirement and so on. So these are statutory and regulatory requirements or legal requirements that is applicable for our business. So we need to address those things. So context is external and internal issues and their combination, how it can affect an organization's quality management system or any other management system that you consider. So from this purpose, we develop policy, and with the policy, aligned with the policy, we develop objectives. So those are the results we wish to achieve, and organizational, external and internal issues bring in some kind of risks and opportunities which can put hindrance to achieving the objectives or create a favorable condition that enables organization to achieve their objectives. So we need to include those things. So it says organization shall determine external and internal issues that are relevant, the purpose and its strategic direction. The purpose and strategic direction of the organization is what problems is this organization going to solve? And the objective is what results they are striving to achieve, what goals they are trying to achieve, what market they are trying to penetrate, which geographical area they wish to expand locally or internationally, and the objectives that they are striving to achieve, the business goals. And that is what is the strategic direction. So the organizational quality objectives has to be aligned with the strategic direction, with the strategic objectives of the organization. That's what it means. Objectives are the results that you want to chase. So there must be a plan. So the organization must have a plan in place. Who will do what? What will be done? When things will be done? When things will be measured? What resource will be needed? How we are going to measure the achievements? How frequently you are going to measure those achievements? These are all part of the plan to achieve objectives. So a plan needs to be in place to achieve objectives. Otherwise, objectives will remain as a dream the company wish to achieve. So how the flow is working? You are going to have a purpose of the organization with which the company has been established or the organization has been established. It could be for profit, not for profit, commercial organization, or whatever type of business they're in. They have got a purpose. And those purpose are driven by policies, objectives, and those objectives to a plan, and you measure and monitor the plan. Those plans will have to be fine-tuned as the organization moves, because external and internal issues can bring risks as well as opportunities. The organization should move like a river. When there is an obstruction, the river changes direction. It is very same when there is a problem encountered or there's a challenge the organization is facing, you change the strategic direction of the organization. The river has to keep flowing, an organization has to keep moving. That's what is the similarity of a river and an organization. So this is how you as an auditor must look at whether there is a purpose statement, what are the risks, and how things are done. One of the most important thing you have to note here is the standard does not require the organization to document the risks and the opportunities. It does not require the organization to quantify the risks. It only requires the organization to consider those. Now, the question is, if they don't have the documented information, then how they are going to analyze and do further activities. So it is most likely that most of the organization will have the risk determination and those risks will be documented, but it is an organizational discretion and prerogative how they define. They can do a SWOT analysis, they can make a risk matrix, or whatever way. The standard does not require the organization to maintain or retain a documented information with regard to the risks and opportunities, but most of the organizations will most likely do it. So as an auditor, you will ask, how do you control them? How do you consider them? How do you review them periodically? Because risk is an iterative process. Risk can go off, a new risk can come. So there is an iterative process that the organization must keep looking at the market scenario. So these are to be assessed, and that affects its ability to achieve intended results, means the objectives of its quality management system. So issues that can affect achievement of objectives are those that we need to determine. An organization shall monitor and review information about these external and internal issues. Monitor means there must be a periodicity of this review, and we should review this information at a periodic interval. Note 1, it says issues can be positive and negative factors, and understanding the organizational external context can be facilitated by considering issues arising from legal, technological, competitive, market, cultural, social, and economic environment, whether international, national, regional, or local. For example, cultural sensitivity. For example, a company is operating in Middle East. So culture in Middle East is very different from culture in US, for example, or Europe, or for example, in India. In US, it's not a problem for the women to work in the night shifts. But in Middle East, it is very uncommon, other than hospitals, for the females to work at night in the factories or in the manufacturing industries. It's not a norm. So these are some of the factors an organization has to consider while manning their shifts, which will, of course, impact their HR policy and the manpower needs and the competence needs to deploy in various shifts for their work. So you have to consider those cultural and social factors and economic environment that will influence the organization's operation. And based on that, you have to have your plan to achieve those objectives. Understanding internal context can be facilitated by considering issues related to values, culture, knowledge, performance of the organization. These are the internal issues that an organization shall consider. 4.2 is understanding the needs and expectations of the interested parties. Interested parties are those who are influenced by the organization. For example, owners. For example, the investors. For example, the society. For example, the suppliers. For example, the buyers. For example, the legal law enforcing agencies, even employees. So those neighbors, for example, those who are using our products and services, they all become interested parties. Even those who are affected by the product and services are also affected. For example, society becomes an interested party by the operation of an university. Educational institutions are to produce people. They are ready for serving the nation. They are ready for their job. They are competent. So your education system and the university is producing best in class people who are ready to serve the organizations and serve the nation and serve the local industry. So if they are producing better capable person, they are doing a better service to the nation and the service to the society. Let me share this interesting slide and that shows the interested parties and the stakeholders. Let's have a look at it. Interested parties are the stakeholders, persons or organization that can affect or be affected or perceive itself to be affected by a decision or an activity of an organization. So this is stakeholders. Stakeholders are basically interested party. Now, I will show you, for example, it's customer, society. We have already talked about people within the organization, opposing pressure groups, partners, competitors, regulators, bankers, providers, unions, sometimes trade unions are there. This is a very interesting map, of stakeholders map. You can see organization is within this YOLO central circle. The management and temporary staffs and all of those are part of the organization. And on the top, you have got the regulatory body or regulatory bodies, those which are responsible to manage the organization. Regulatory bodies requirements are mandatory for the organization to ensure compliance. This is called compliance obligation. Their requirements are essential. For example, for a car manufacturing company in India, they have to comply with emission regulations, Bharat 2, Bharat 3, or whatever regulation is in force, you have to comply with it. In Europe, you have to go to Euro norm. Then you have got international customers outside. These are all outside. Multinational customer, national customers, small and medium enterprises, retail customers. Local community, local council, they are the people. If you go to a hotel, they have to ensure the law of the land. At the same time, local municipalities special requirement, for example, how to handle the wastes and so on. Again, on ad hoc supplier on the other side, IT support service providers, temporary agencies, those are the providers. So within the organization, you have the executive board, internal audit team, sales, marketing, all these corporate social responsibility steering groups, finance, HR, and all the organizational teams within the organization. So management, organizational team, and external bodies. This is what is stakeholders. So what you need to do as an auditor will ask, okay, what kind of regulation you have identified for your products and services. You cannot simply say the requirement of the organization is to comply with the regulation or applicable legal requirements. This is quite understood. What is expected within this regulation? Which are those regulations applicable for this organization? And those things will be coming from maybe an environmental regulation, a product related requirement, or so on. And those are requirements for the organization to comply with. And there is an evidence that there are some people to look at them, and there is a mechanism and the process to address those things. Again, organization's own requirement has to be considered, whether it is achieving the purpose of the organization, are policies adequate, are the organizational objectives measurable, are they being achieved, is there a right process in place, is there a good strategic plan that is helping the organization, is the resource enough, or whatever those things are required. Are the organizational internal stakeholders like department people are really contributing to the organization's achievement, and how they are being affected and how they are affecting from within the organization and external. So what do you expect from the local community? Local community has got some expectations from the organization that you do not pollute the area, you do not create noise from your operation, you do not leave smoke, you do not leave bad odors or pollute the environment and things like that. Do not let your effluents going out of the place and polluting the local environment where nobody can stay. What about safety of operation? Yes, a safer operation of a plant could be a very important expectation from the local community. Imagine Bhopal gas tragedy. In 1984 in India, during Bhopal gas tragedy, more than 10,000 people died from the release of a poisonous and toxic gas called methyl isocyanate. The tank has ruptured, releasing tons of toxic, lethal killer gas, methyl isocyanate, killing 10,000 people. Imagine there is a cigarette manufacturing company, right? There is a fire in their tobacco godown. There's a very highly thick local community and population. Imagine the tobacco godown is on fire. What is going to be the condition of the neighborhood? So the neighbors expect a safer operation also from the plant and from the factory or the manufacturing plant of an organization. So those kind of things are very important. So multinational customers, international customers, local customer, their needs, so on. So multinational and local customer have got their own requirement. So customer requirements are with regard to the products and services and the timeliness of delivery and so on. So this is how you have to identify what are those requirements that organization has to comply with and how do you address them and how do you demonstrate that you are in conformity or in compliance. So interested parties, they are relevant to quality management system. So we have to identify there are many interested parties who are relevant for quality management system. When we are talking about quality management system, we'll talk about legal requirement with regard to product quality. Interested parties, those are relevant, could be the legal requirement. Those are applicable to our product and services. The requirement of these interested parties that are relevant to the quality management system. Some of the requirements may not be relevant for quality management system. So those interested parties whose requirements becomes relevant are those who will be considered in quality management system. And it says organization shall monitor and review information about these interested parties and their relevant requirements. So you would like to see how the organization has identified the relevant interested party relevant for quality management system when you're talking about quality management or occupational health and safety when you are implementing occupational health and safety management system. So as an auditor, you have to see that whether this organization have identified them or not. And now the organization needs to monitor them. Monitor means they have to have a process of periodically reviewing them and update them as necessary because these issues can bring risks and opportunities and which in dynamic circumstances can continuously change. So the organization needs to keep track of these issues in a very significant way. I am in a very critical juncture today. Who will run the government in India for next 5 years have been already voted by its people. Counting is going on. So for the political party, which is an organization, the people in the country are the interested party, the voters, the industries, the people, those are being affected by the organization. Government's business is to offer services to its people of the nation. Welfare services, employment services, security services, education services, healthcare services, employment opportunity creation. These are all mandate of the national government. So they have to continuously think and consider what the customers or the stakeholders are expecting. If they're addressing those requirements, they'll be voted to power. If they lose sight of those, they may be voted out of power. So it is an important thing. It is an extremely important thing. The political parties assess the perception of the stakeholders, the voters' perception, the community's perception, what they are expecting, what they are liking, what they are not liking, what is their future expectations from the government by opinion poll or similar kind of tools. The perception can be analyzed to arrive at a decision which is the evidence-based decision-making approach, the quality management. So determining the needs and expectations of the interested parties are extremely important. So this is what is expectation, understanding the needs and expectation of interested parties. Clause number 4.3 is the scope of the quality management system, determining the scope of the quality management system. This scope is different from clause number 1 scope, which is the scope of the standard itself. This scope 4.3 is talking about what products and services this organization is going to offer to its customer. The range of products and services. And for an automobile company, manufacturing car and offering the car, meeting customer needs and expectations is a requirement. And just imagine when a car is introduced in Indian market, it has to comply with the environmental regulation, which is environmental regulation with regard to emission. This product has to comply with. And if you are launching a car in Europe, you have to comply with European norm. And you may be aware there was an incident of a very leading car company. They were flouting with some of the environmental issues and the exhaust emission data. The company had a big setback, and they had to apologize. In fact, their CEO had to apologize to the people for not meeting the requirement of the nation where they were operating and offering the products, violating the environmental norm which was applicable for their products. So you have to identify and determine the scope and boundaries and applicability of the quality management system. The scope means activities, products, and services, the product lines, the work of the organization. Sometimes we are offering training services. This is our scope. So the external and internal issues has to be considered. Requirement of the relevant interested parties. For example, we're talking about the products when you are making. The scope of the work will have to also consider the needs and expectations of the relevant interested parties. Products and services of the organization. What products and services they are offering. For example, an organization is designing, manufacturing cranes in one division. They are manufacturing motor graders, vibratory rollers, and road building equipment in another division. Another division makes rolling stock. I'm talking about a company where I worked was a company called Jessup and Company. We are making bridges and gates and structures and cranes and rolling stocks and all. Paper machineries, mining machineries. So the company had an option that will go with the paper machinery division or mining machinery division. So the organization scope could be much wider, but the scope of certification is limited to designing and manufacturing of paper and mining machineries, or manufacture of rolling stock, or design and manufacture of cranes, things like that. So you have to identify the products and services. For TCB, the scope is offering quality management, occupational health and safety, and technical training, including management system training in environmental management system. So we give training, we give management system assessment, we give quality verification services for the products and projects. So these are the kind of scope of our work that we are offering. So this is what is called scope and boundary. Boundary could be which is within the scope of the organization, which is outside the scope of the organization, right? And the standard says organization shall apply all the requirements of the standard if they are applicable within the determined scope of its quality management system. That's the requirement. Now, if some of the requirements are not applicable, you can state and take them out of the scope of the organization. It is quite possible that an organization does not perform design and they only manufacture. So design can be out of the scope. It is not applicable. They only manufacture and do the construction and erection and after sales service, those kind of things. All right. Now, quality management system and processes. Organization needs to identify the quality management system and its processes. So processes, the standard requires promotion of process approach by the top management. The top management needs to drive the organization to think in terms of processes. In other words, identify inputs and outputs from each process which is covered under the activity and control them. Design can be one process, manufacturing can be one process, inspection can be one process, procurement can be one process, determining customer requirements can be one process, after sales service could be one process. These all can be linked together. So the standard requires to identify those processes, establish their link, determine their sequence, identify their inputs and outputs. So let us see what the standard requires. Organization shall determine the processes needed for the quality management system and their application throughout the organization. Determine the inputs required and the outputs expected from the processes. Determine the sequence and interaction of these processes. Determine and apply criteria and methods, including monitoring, measurement, and related performance indicator needed to ensure effective operation and controls of this process. Let me show you how in TCB we have identified various processes and their interaction for our inspection and verification services. For example, first of all, we call it process approach model for TCB IVS inspection and verification service. So overall company quality management system interfaces the process model. So customer requirements and then service realization, resource management, measurement processes, and then customer satisfaction measurement processes. So we started with we get an inquiry from the customer, right? Receive an inquiry from the customer, and then we check can we meet this requirement and can we do this. If not, we send a regret letter to the customer. If we can do yes, then we provide a quotation. And once the quotation is submitted, it will be subject to customer acceptance, whether they've accepted it or not. If it is accepted, we review the contracts and the orders, and then we move further. Now imagine if it is not, if we fail to secure the order, we investigate what went wrong, whether our price was right or where we have not done it. Those kind of things can happen. Now, if once we got the order, we review the contract, and then we start mobilizing personnel for the operation, we monitor the resources. Like that, the whole product realization or service realization process works. What I'm trying to show you here is how we have identified various processes for provision of inspection service, and we have integrated them, and this is what is needed. So while performing the audit, we or our internal auditor or external auditors, for example, our accreditation body looks at these processes, and they look at whether the inputs from one process is flowing to the another process logically, and all the processes are integrated so that nothing is missed. One information, one input from the previous process is missed to flow to the next process can lead to a problem. Therefore, these process mapping is so fundamentally important. This is one of the most important requirement of ISO 9000 standard, where it says identify the process and identify the inputs and desired output and link all the processes. Determine the resources needed for the processes and ensure their availability. Resources could be human resource, it could be machinery, manpower, infrastructure, building, transportation facilities, telecommunication facilities, web-based solutions, software, or whatever is needed are part of infrastructure. It could be measuring and monitoring resources as well, and they should be made available. Assign responsibilities and authorities for these processes. So we identify, the organization is required to identify the process owners who will control those processes. So once the process owner is identified, they are required to manage those processes. Address the risks and opportunities determined in accordance with the requirements. So you have to identify what kind of risk is possible to surface while operation of these processes. What kind of risks are likely to be found while you are managing those processes. Organization needs to identify the risks as well as opportunities that can affect those processes. and also evaluate these processes and implement any changes needed to ensure that these processes achieve intended results and improve these processes. And quality management system improvement itself can be a process. We talk about PDCA model of improvement of organizational quality management system. And standard requires in 4.4.2 to the extent necessary. It says to the extent necessary that is left to the organization shall maintain documented information to support operations of its processes. So it is left to the organization to develop and maintain documented information and the supporting media that needs to be referred, such as procedure, work instructions, guides, and all those kind of things. Recipes, for example, formulations, for example, are part of the documented information necessary for support of the operation and its processes, and also retain documented information to have confidence that these processes have been carried out as planned. This means that the organization needs to demonstrate that we have performed those activities and there are verifiable records. For example, throughout the standard requires different kind of documented informations to be maintained and retained. For example, quality policy shall be available as and maintained as documented information. So you as an auditor going to ask, standard requires you to have a quality policy. Do you have one? Can I have a look at it? So you look at the policy and see what all requirements are there with regard to quality policy and where they are available in the policy statement. The standard requires the organization to maintain competence records, design development verification records, design development inputs, design development validation records, non-conformity reports, for example, the corrective action reports, for example. You need to keep inspection and test records to demonstrate that all requirements with regard to the products and services have been met with. You need to retain management review record. You need to retain record of corrective actions and preventive actions and so on. So wherever the standard requires retained documented information, those are required to provide evidence that those requirements have been ensured by the organization. So the organization implementing the management system has to maintain and retain those documented information. As an auditor, you check whether those mandatory documented information as required by the standard are maintained or retained or not. That's how the clause number 4 can be audited.